Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening for the launch of Colin Hassard's Age of the Microwave dinner, just like this. I'm John Walsh, commissioning editor for Dur Press here in Connemara, and it's really a pleasure to be publishing Colin's collection. Many of you know Colin is a performance poet, quite a brilliant performance poet. This is his debut collection. Let's see. Oh, there you go. So he's got real poems on real pages in this, and that's why it's so exciting. And joining us this evening, we have poet and artist Amy Louise Wyatt from Bangor. Amy is going to introduce Colin and invite him to, I won't say read some poems, because most of the time he doesn't read the poems, he actually performs them, which is quite extraordinary. So Amy will be inviting him to do that, and then to a Q&A. And if you have any questions for Colin that you would like answers to, then you can put them in the comments, and Amy or I, whatever, will feed them to Colin and see if he can come up with answers. And I think Colin's got a very nice surprise for us also. So right now we will bring in Amy. Hi, Amy.
Hi, John. How are
How are
you?
you?
Good. I'm great.
That's good. Love your hair.
Thank you very much. This is the lockdown look.
Oh, it's really good. It's really good. So how are things in Bangor?
Beautiful, really sunny, barbecue weather, which is nice
Good.
for the long weekend.
Oh, good, good. So are you going to barbecue?
Tomorrow night, the husband's promised.
Oh, good, oh, good. So I'll hand over to you, Amy, and you got your copy of the book?
Oh my goodness, yes.
Oh, good, right. So take it away.
Thanks, John. Hi, everybody. I'm absolutely delighted to be here tonight. I am a huge fan of Colin's, and it was a real honour for Colin to ask me to introduce him. So I know loads of you know Colin from his fantastic spoken word career and all of his major successes, and it's just really a pleasure to see his words that we are so used to listening to. Now we can read them on the page, and I'm really just so happy to see Age of the Microwave dinner in print. So I'm just going to read a little bit of the biography. Not that you probably need much introduction to Colin, because he's been such a prominent figure on the scene. But just in case you do, Colin is from Banbridge in County Down, Northern Ireland. He was runner-up in the Seamus Heaney Award for New Writing in 2018 and shortlisted for the Northwest Words Poetry Competition in 2019. As a spoken word poet, Colin has twice been Ulster Poetry Slam champion, which is a huge thing. Was joint winner of the Kirst Murphy Spoken Award in 2020, as well as a former winner of Poetry Slams in the Belfast Book Festival and the Belly Laughs Comedy Festival. Not only that, as if that wasn't enough, he has performed his work on Sky One, has written, commissioned poems for BBC television and national adverts. He was writer in residence for the Northern Ireland Human Rights Festival 2015, poet in residence for all three series of BBC Radio Ulster shows Science and Stuff, and has an ongoing creative residency with the Duncairn Centre for Culture and Arts, Belfast. I am really excited to hear Colin read. Just before he reads, I just want to tell you some of the fantastic things that have already been said about his debut collection, his long-awaited debut collection. Another fantastic poet, Linda McKenna, who I'm sure you all know, who's been also published by Dura with great success, calls really, Colin's work clever, tender, and funny. And I think that is really, she's hit the nail on the head with that. Brave and beautiful poems that will stay with you for a long time. And Stephen James Smith also said about Colin's work that he reveals himself as a person who cares deeply for others. And I know that from Colin being such a huge supporter of the poetry scene and of others. He's self-aware, playful, challenging, and the poems are heartfelt and inspirational. And something that I've really got from this collection too, I think that Stephen James Smith says here, is it's like a conversation waiting to be had. So with no further ado, absolutely over the moon to welcome Colin to read his poems from Age of the Microwave Dinner.
Hello everybody and welcome. The Age of the Microwave Dinner has begun. Thank you, Amy, for that wonderful introduction, and I am delighted that you agreed to be the hostess with the mostess. It's
Delighted.
a pleasure to have you with me on this very proud occasion for me, and what an honor it is for me to join the amazing writers on the Dura Press roster, and thank you to John as well for that introduction. Now, even though we're all well used to the virtual world by this stage, it still seems odd to be presenting this from the confines of my house. But I would like to say a hearty thank you to the Northern Ireland Executive for deciding to open the pubs and restaurants for the same day as this launch. So a bigger thank you should go to everyone who is still able to tune in from their home, from their garden, or indeed from the beer garden. We are here to launch Age of the Microwave Dinner that I have in my hand, this gorgeous eye-catching cover. I will be reading a selection of poems from the book, and then afterwards I'll be answering some questions from Amy and any that come in from the audience. So as John said, if you have any questions, put them in the chat box. But to answer a couple of questions straight away, yes, this is my suit, and no, I am not wearing it for a bet. So Age of the Microwave Dinner is split into 5 parts, which are divided like the steps of cooking a microwave dinner. They are pierce film lid several times, heat for designated time, peel back film lid, stir well before serving, and do not reheat. But of course, there is a twist on each of those, which I will mention as we go through. For now, though, I'm going to read the first poem in the book, which is the only poem in the book which isn't a part of those 5 sections. It's written in the style of an A to Z, with each new line starting with the next letter of the alphabet. And this is to kind of let you understand me a little better. And it's called About the Author. Adheres to every only child stereotype. Brings his own confectionery to the cinema. Culchie who couldn't milk a cow. Dresses to impress or recline depending on mood. Emotionally unstable during black and white films. Fascinated by millionaires kicking a ball. Googler of own name. Happy-go-lucky as long as he gets his own way. Irish by birth, British by assimilation. Jack and Coke, Casanova with an inferiority complex. Keyboard owner, not player. Looking at the gutter with his head in the clouds. Mummy's boy. Never done a proper day's graft. Once rhymed hun, tongue, and lemon in the same verse. Poet, of sorts, quotes other poets better. Refuses to work weeknights, weekends, or for minimum wage. Sexually durable in soft lighting. Tolerant of the same sorts, kissing and cuddling. Uses cutlery to eat fast food. Vocalist, but not a singer. Willing to meet like-minded writers for potential plagiarizing. X-rated movie enthusiast. Yet to cross his heart and hope to die. Zoologist, animal rights activist, and meat eater. And that last line is one of many contradictions that you're going to hear over the next 20 minutes or so. And I see someone has joined the chat there from Lurgan, and how wonderful it is that you have the internet out there now. So from the first section, to give it its first title, or its full title, is Pierce Film Lid Several Times, Like a Heart You No Longer Cared For. And this is where you'll find all the poems on relationship and heartbreak, just to get us off on a positive note. So the first poem from the first section has another catchy title, which is 54 degrees, 21 minutes, 33 seconds north, 6 degrees, 15 minutes, 58 seconds west, which are coordinates for a location in Banbridge Town in the County Down. And it also contains a not so subtle reference to Seamus Heaney's poem Digging. Before I make the pitch, here's a loose overview. A feeling of love, a company becomes a crowd, good outweighs bad. But the long story short is repeatedly opening a wound and hoping salt is in the salt shaker. put it like this: some pick up a shovel, others a pen, the shrewd pick up bargains. What I've gathered is a culmination of all of the above. It may be noted later how Earth is 70% water. If I was a romantic, I'd say it's 100% love, but that will soon be disputed. What's certain is the girl waiting in a field off Killen Lane with 2 stolen cigarettes stopped waiting. The cigarettes went up in smoke, and we've yet to discuss the offer. Still, if you prefer long stories longer, you've come to the right place. And now, ladies and gentlemen, and those of no fixed gender, I present you with the poem that was shortlisted for the Arrivo Northwest Words Poetry Competition. And just to show off my linguistic skills, this poem actually contains 2 lines in French, but I'll put extra emphasis on those lines, and I hope that you can understand them. And this poem's called Instructions for Whoever Answers the Phone. If the phone makes a weird elongated ring, it'll be a call from Paris, and a female voice will ask you, "Is Colin there?" Use the pen and paper beside the phone to note any background noise. A man's voice, a candle being lit, a toilet flushing. If you hear any children, hang up. Should there only be silence, that means she's in the bedroom and is most likely holding the phone in her hand rather than between her ear and shoulder. That's your cue to keep her talking. She'll want to know about Ireland. Tell her about the booming tourism and how fantastic the restaurants are. Say the weather has been mild. Don't mention how the rain has been coming in sideways or how we've had snow in April. If she tells you a story, the ending will be just before she says, "And that is all?" You'll not be able to see it, but she'll also flick her hand up like she's tossing a dice at the ceiling. If she asks you for a story, start with once upon a time and end it with me standing outside the door of her apartment block on a cool summer night, unsure if I should press the buzzer and go back inside or walk along the promenade and hope an answer washes off the tide. It's unlikely there'll be a lull in the conversation, but if so, ask her to guess how long it takes a bullet fired at the moon to fall to the ground. She may know the answer. She may hang up. In either case, you'll start to feel like you've never really looked at the stars, and you'll find yourself wondering when she's going to call again. I have here in my hand our host, Amy Louise Wyatt's debut poetry pamphlet, A Language I Understand, which came out earlier this year, and it's full of really beautiful and inspiring poems. And the reason I mention it now is because in it, Amy explores her past, her memories, and her loved ones. And one of those people regularly mentioned is her granny. And I'm going to read a poem now of mine, which mentions my own granny from my mother's side, who was my main babysitter when I was growing up, when my mother and father were working, and who I know would have loved this poetry journey that I've been on. And this poem's called Berries. If youth has a colour, it's most likely white. Bright white like the snow-covered fields in the Finnish winter that play tricks on the mind. Day is night, night is day, things last forever. My youth is more the colour of blackberries, the kind I was forced to pick from wild hedges by my grandmother who feared the school holidays would bring the devil's work into idle hands. Standing together on the country lane, she demonstrated how to clasp the berry between the forefinger and thumb, as if you're about to straighten the tail of a pig, and then twist, which was easier said than done, with my hand slipping out of my father's gloves each time a berry was dropped in the bucket. Everything was ill-fitting. The gloves, the hedges, the weeds, even the sun felt like it was suffocating the sky. Everything except my grandmother. She dropped berries into her bucket with the pulse of a distant lambeg drum, humming to herself like she did through each chore. Later, she'd sing while boiling the berries in a saucepan, with cooking apples and lemon juice to make bramble jelly. They say in ancient Greece that the first offering of every feast was presented to Hestia, goddess of the hearth and family. How improper that my grandmother's spoon was often bequeathed to me, for I would grumble when there was work to be done. I recall lifting a berry from the bucket and holding it up into the sun. So Amy mentioned in her introduction about my spoken word career, and it was around the mid-2010s that I changed my focus away from purely spoken word and performing into more page poetry and trying to get work published. And in early 2017, I had a poem called You're There Now, published in a CAP anthology, which went on to be then longlisted for the Seamus Heaney Award for New Writing. Now, the poem didn't win the award, but it was an honour and really a total shock for me to be on the list. And that was really the turning point in my mind that maybe I was okay at this page poetry stuff. And then later on that year, I applied successfully for Arts Council of Northern Ireland funding, and I got to meet with the head of literature, Damien Smith, who gave me loads of great advice. And the main thing that he told me was you've got to find your voice. And it was quite apt at the time because I was actually using the voice of a middle-aged Japanese housewife. But I left that meeting with Damien feeling 10 foot tall, and it really begun my journey into finding this voice that I'm now using, and indeed to getting this book published. So I'm extremely grateful to Damien for everything he's done and has done and continues to do for me and for literature in the North. And on a side note, he's the only person to ever compliment me for wearing a polo neck, which I'm also grateful for. So this poem is a turning point, and it's called You're There Now. You're there now, sitting on your old sofa, with a knitted rug and matching cushions, surrounded by jazz records and ideas. And on the wall are postcards and a map of New York City and a calendar. And the coal bucket overflows with news. And the tea is brewed strong, and the teapot sits on a chopping board, and the room smells of vanilla and sometimes cheese. And beside the door is a bicycle. And the door is open to let the breeze circle the room and carry the off-key notes out into summer. And on Friday, you'd relax in a warm bath of seaweed carried in a sack from Connemara, and no one cares about any of this, except those who remember what love is. And now we move on to step 3 in the microwave dinner, which is peel film lid, as if you were trying to reveal some hidden meaning. And these are the poems of mystery and melancholy. And to give you a little insight into my writing process, the first poem in this section, or the first poem I'm going to read, I should say, is called Keys, and it's got 7 stanzas. The first 6 stanzas were written in about 20 minutes in a poetry writing workshop, and then the 7th stanza, the final stanza, wasn't written until about a year later. So that, I think, goes some way to explaining why it took me 38 years to write this debut book. But as they say on the Viagra adverts, good things come to those who wait. Keys. I will not beg for the keys to the city, but if they fall into my possession, I'll drive into the city centre most nights after 1 a.m., stopping at a sweet shop for a sugar hit, to sit silently in a pub, checking the crossword answers in yesterday's paper, supping on a pint that I poured myself, just one though, as I'll still need to drive home, weaving in and out of the bus lane, with the keys to the city on the dashboard where they catch the light from the moon. And the moon might remember me from even lonelier nights when we'd meet between the pavement and staggered streetlights that I now whiz past. Nights of one-way conversations, with the moon listening intently to the recital of laments that would never be uttered in daylight. But I wonder if the sun who knew my face and the moon who knew my name ever spoke during their shift change and put 2 and 2 together. Would they have guessed that someday I'd possess the keys to the city, or drive so late and recklessly, or be able to milk the moon for another melancholy poem? And where will we poets be without the moon for inspiration? This next poem doesn't mention the moon, but it does mention the wind, the rain, and alien planets. And back in the early 2000s, I was studying media studies at the Ulster University in Coleraine. And my dream at that point was to one day maybe work in the film industry, maybe even move to Hollywood, California. Obviously, that didn't happen. In fact, what question does every media studies graduate like to ask? Can I take your order, please? But this poem is written from the perspective of me looking back at that young man with the dream, but knowing that even if he had made it to California, he would have been homesick. And this is Give Me Tinseltown. How exciting it must be to use a clapperboard, to push a camera on a dolly, to breathe the stillness of ancient battles and alien planets before action, to have conflict, death and grief stopped on cue, to wrap a shoot and pass a film star in the car park, to drive home on palm tree-lined streets in a pink Cadillac with a bumper sticker saying honk if you something something. Just to think of it makes my heart flap like those palm tree leaves in the Pacific wind. What a life. You can have all the gin joints and all the towns and all the world if you give me Tinseltown on a string. But if someday, under studio lights, I catch drizzle from a rain machine, which starts a slow motion montage of people clutching pints, roads with paint around potholes, thick gravy, draft excluders, grannies asking, guess who's dead? I'll know, even with hope, that my friends tell their friends they know someone who works in the Hollywood with 2 L's, but he hasn't gone up himself. the life don't amount to a hill of beans. Then just as the violins reach their peak, a clapperboard snaps, a scene is cut, and the plot thickens as I sprint lot to find the ruby red slippers. And now we come to the halfway point in tonight's show, and I ask you to bear with me for this short commercial break. Are you the sort of person who visits art galleries? Do you listen to the music of the Smiths? Perhaps you enjoy the feeling of melancholy, or simply seek a quieter, lonelier existence. Then you need to try poetry. You may recall poetry from that dreary part of English class which you wanted to avoid. Well, I'm here to tell you it's still around and it's even more tedious than ever. If you're searching for a hobby which none of the family can enjoy, or merely wanting to have people think you're a weirdo, or gay, or both, then poetry is for you. For only $19.99, we'll send you a free poetry starter pack, which includes a quill and parchment, a beret, a rhyming dictionary, and your very own pocket thesaurus. Now, instead of saying, I wandered lonely as a cloud, you can say, I circumambulated companionless as a nimbus stratus. And our handy guidebook features hints and tips on how to survive life as a poet, such as bringing empty food containers to a party where there's free food. Not to mention advice on how to answer the repeated questions which every poet gets asked, such as, how do you write a poem? Why do you like poetry? And, so, what do you write about? There's also a special illustrated section outlining the correct facial expression to make when people tell you, you'll have to write a poem about this. Contact us now and the first 20 subscribers will receive a free black cat. Visit IamAPoetAndIamAwareOfIt.com for details. Poetry cannot be held responsible for feelings of anguish, disappointment, anxiety, or depression caused by a rejection letter from a publisher. Under no circumstances do we recommend placing your head in an oven. And welcome back. That poem was called Commercial Break, but on a more serious note, I have been watching a lot of live events recently, and it's actually been quite shocking and quite distasteful just how many performers are getting involved in product placement and selling out to the brands, and you've probably seen it yourself. So hopefully this event is a refreshing change from all of that corporate nonsense, although it won't be as refreshing as the delicious taste of Harp Lager. Zesty. So now we move on to part 4 of Microwave Dinner, which is called Stir Well Before Serving with a Cold Dish of Revenge. And I'm only going to read one poem from it, but it's in 3 parts. And to give a little background, in that last poem I mentioned about how we always get asked, so what do you write about? And I got asked that one night quite snidely by a man in a pub in Belfast in Lavery's, if anybody knows it. And I replied to him that I mainly write about penguins. And as it turns out, he knew quite a bit about penguins, and my lie was then exposed. So at a later date, I did in fact research penguins and write this poem based on penguins, but the penguins are a metaphor. And for any poetry traditionalists who are watching, this poem actually rhymes, and it's called The Penguin Trilogy. If a penguin falls over on an ice floe, does it get embarrassed, or can it scramble back and hide unrecognized amongst the raft? You probably can't say that all penguins look alike, what with political correctness these days, as someone will call you a racist. It's an awful state of affairs, as I know a few jokes about penguins and nuns, and a handful of one-liners about marriage, and then one dirty limerick which I recite to children on the rare occasions I happen to be lumbered with someone's offspring. It's amazing how a carefully placed bomb can lead to such unbridled amusement. A willy requires even more delicate placement. It's confusing for the average human, never mind an aquatic flightless bird waddling around hoping to find an attractive like-minded bird of opposite gender for a lifetime of frolics. Perhaps that's why they're monogamous. When you've got wings but can't fly, there's more than likely a powder keg of pent-up frustration that can only be alleviated by regular intimate procreation. How peculiar then that Galapagos penguins, despite the warmer climate, only breed during summer months, whereas those penguins in minus conditions, such as the emperor and king, can easily pop out babies 2 or 3 times per year. The main reason I account for the consistency is that it's the most enjoyable way to keep warm, especially with no land-based predators to cause them harm. 2. If a penguin got the right lawyer, he, she could definitely sue Penguin the Biscuit people Penguin the book people, and Penguin the clothing people for unlawful commercial use of his/her likeness. It would set a precedence in the legal world. Suddenly lawsuits from everywhere. A jaguar suing jaguar, a puma suing puma, an owl suing hooters, and so on, until all companies who wish to use an animal in their branding would be required to have written permission either from a lion, as per its position in the animal kingdom, or directly from a particular species. Apes and other knuckle draggers can at least sign their name and vote in elections, but good luck getting the signature of a red snapper or a dolphin. Even those that are trained to bounce balls and do a variety of tricks in the name of entertainment are unlikely to give consent or understand all the ins and outs of such a complex legal arrangement. The inevitable danger will be if animals are, instead of payment, promised funding for veterinary care or annihilation of slave and forced labour. As my first, no second wife always said, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it shave. 3. If a penguin can become the gentleman of crime, wear a top hat, tuxedo, monocle, run a successful nightclub, and not only that, be regarded as Batman's most intelligent adversary, well then, surely there's hope for all the constituents in the animal kingdom. There may even be animals out there now standing by locked gates thinking they'll never wind up in the slaughterhouse or on plates in mouth-sized clumps. But like clockwork, keys are turned, machinery rumbles, and even the most well-meaning herd will find themselves hunted in the chilled aisle. And no one's counting all the turkeys staring at the rain, not realizing they're drowning. Meanwhile, many miles away in the mid-Pacific, a blue whale whips its tail, and the ripples in the water travel all the way to the Antarctic, where they hit an ice floe and bring us back to where we started. So there's one line in that poem which was, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it shave, which was actually written by my brother-in-law, Colin Carrigan. And it's a great line, but just in case he rings me after this event, that's one line in a book of 2,946 lines, or in other words, it was a 0.03% contribution, which is more than everyone else, but let's not talk about royalties. So the final part, part 5, is called Do Not Reheat for Fear of Death or Worse, which is where I get into the topics of life and death and the meaning of it all. So we started with heartbreak, and now we're going to finish with death. But as it's a Friday night, I'm going to keep it light, and I'm only going to read one poem from this section, and it's called When I Think Death is Coming. When I think death is coming, I leave the front door open, not just unlocked, wide open. And he'll say, this is why he's dead, tempting danger in a neighborhood like this. In the hallway, he'll be expecting silence because that's how he usually finds you. But there'll be noise behind each door and he won't know which room to enter. In the kitchen, every appliance will be on. Washing machine, dishwasher, blender, all empty but doing what they're supposed to. And he'll be agitated by the unnecessary noise. In the living room, the TV will be at full volume with pizza boxes, beer cans, newspapers scattered all around. And he'll say, this is why he's dead, polluting his mind and body for so long. In the bedroom, there'll be pillows and clothes stuffed under the duvet to resemble a body. And he'll say, this is why he's dead, still lying in bed at this hour of the day. But when he hauls back the cover, he'll discover he's been tricked. So he'll get mad and bash open every door and check each hiding place. When he enters the study, he'll locate on the desk a poem written about him, which will only increase his fury, for it will be needlessly spiteful. When he realizes that I'm not in the house, he'll run out to the garden, but I won't be sitting on the patio or tending to the flowers. Then just as he's about to give up the search, he'll hear a clatter of noise from the shed and say, if he's not already dead in there, I'll kill the bastard. So for my final poem of the evening, I want to jump back to part 2 and read one more from there. But before I do, there are some people that I would like to thank for getting to me to this point, and I have them written down here. So they are my mum and dad for supporting me creatively, emotionally, and financially. To the poet David Smiley for agreeing to let his nephew's friend, who he'd never met, tag along with him to an open mic poetry night. To Mary Denver at Bookfinders for her kindness and guidance in those early years. To the poet and legend that is Seamus Fox. To Ashley Manners for his continuing friendship and technological assistance. To Damien Smith and the Arts Council of Northern Ireland. All the arts organisations that I've worked for, including the Community Arts Partnership, Voluntary Arts Ireland, and the Dunkern Arts Centre. Go Team Dunkern. Ballyhackamore writers, and that man again, David Smiley, for providing feedback on a number of the poems in the book, to the brilliant writers that Amy's mentioned, Linda McKenna and Stephen James Smith, for providing blurbs for the back cover, to the designer, Trina Walsh at Dura Press, for this stunning cover, which I absolutely love, to all the poets I ever worked with or was inspired by. There are too many to name, but you know who you are, and thank you all. To Amy, of course, for hosting and promoting of this event, and indeed for agreeing to publish some of my work in the Bangor Literary Journal over the years. To my wife, Katri, and dog, Amber, who are watching downstairs. To all the people and places that inspired the poems. And a final thank you, and without doubt the biggest thank you, goes to John Walsh and Lisa Frank at Dura Press for believing in me, for trusting in me, and for making all of this happen. It is really humbling to be on the Dura Press roster amongst an amazing selection of writers. So thank you for all that you do in promoting poetry and literature on this island. You know, this book obviously doesn't happen without your support and your guidance, but I don't get to this point without the support of all the people and all the organizations that I mentioned, plus many more. And I would like to dedicate this poem to you all and to everyone who's watching. So the Latin motto of Belfast translates as, "For so much, what shall we repay?" And that's what inspired this poem, which is called Potions and Elixirs. I was planted in earth that rests in shadow of either harp or crown. In the mouth of the sandbanks, I'll start that again. I was planted in earth that rests in shadow of either harp or crown. In the mouth of the sandbanks as the hourglass was turned. In a room with dentist stickers half peeled on white plastic cupboards, and a pylon portrait framed in chamois sparkled window. A seed sown in bar and lanyon crafted brick and stone, where factory men in flat caps are photographs of our foundations. The tobacco scent lingers, linen mill relics now drinking dens. I grew in the heat of a coal-fired boiler replenished morning and night, where shirt oxters tell if days are wasted or nights ignited by golden mile taxi lights. Wrapped in my father's stories of Saturday matinees at the Strand, the Harp Bar, the Newcastle Ballroom, and the late-night jazz clubs. I grew with roots stretched in ribbed cages like revellers through the entries, to sprout beyond the lick of the latch and the barbed wire rainbows. In a place where summer is caught in bee-trap jam jars and scorched on the right arm of bus drivers who scowl as you break a fiver for 3 stops. I was watered by rain that runs like Albert clockwork, jeered from clouds coloured ashtray grey to drum on rooftops out of time, but always, always in minor key. I was watered by 2 shades of lemonade, by froth and dregs of the pint glass, by potions and elixirs of gin palace pantheons, where water is siphoned from Silent Valley, and the waters of the shipyard flow with history to the raging sea that swallowed her prize creation. I bloomed into a man who avoids both the heel of the loaf and talk of us and them. In botanic charity shop chic, between cathedral and graffiti, higher than smoke from 11th night bonfires, to see the universe beyond the lamb's tail and the danders, beyond buildings who cried their windows in a burst of confetti, beyond the burdens in the floodplain, beyond caves and rolling hills, over morass, Obel, Napoleon's nose, a poet of the moonlight, a soldier of the dawn who sees his reflection in shop windows and offers resolutions to the bin men and gulls with the hourglass, still counting. And for so much, what shall I repay? For so much, what shall I repay? Belfast, I am your son. Thank you. Thank you for watching.
Colin, I wish we could all be there to clap you in real life. That was phenomenal. Absolutely fantastic. How are you feeling now? Are you enjoying that beer?
Definitely. So see you later.
You deserve it. Just total magic. The way that you can bring it from the page, and the experience on the page and listening are equal. It's just something that I think a lot of us poets would love to be able to do, Colin. So just huge congratulations. I think we probably could have all listened to you for another half an hour, at least an hour, maybe an hour and a half even. Colin, I'll feed you through some of there's loads of comments coming down here. Dura are very proud publishers. Well done, great readings. We have Peter who said well done to Dura for publishing Colin's long-awaited first volume. lots of happy people whose books have arrived today, and they're going to have a weekend off at reading it out in the sun, maybe in a beer garden. Matt from the USA, huge congrats. Great performance from Shane. And there is one question here that is really standing out. Everybody wants to know what brand of shampoo you actually do use.
L'Oreal, because I'm worth it.
A little tiny bit, is it, Colin, you use? Just a little bit?
I've had the same bottle for about 10 years now.
Yeah, but you know, it's good value for money. Colin, that was just fantastic. I'll have a wee look and see what other comments come through as well, but I'm going to ask you some of my questions if you don't mind.
Okay, far away.
Ready? Are you ready?
No.
You've told us a little bit about, obviously, the title of the book and the intriguing, very intriguing sections. I loved that. I loved it. Made it so unique. When you were writing the book, and obviously this is your debut collection, what was your sort of process? And after you finished that process, how does it feel to have it out there in the real world?
Well, I think it was around about 2017 where I had the initial idea for the microwave dinner concept.
Yeah.
And if memory serves me correctly, it was around about October that year that I had sent Dura Press a kind of an introductory email to introduce myself and to kind of give them this idea of this concept. And there's a few emails back and forth, I think over a period of about 6 months. And it was March last year that I got the confirmation that they liked me and they wanted to publish it. And obviously I was delighted to get that email. But then there's always this kind of doubt. I mean, I don't think I'm a pessimistic person. For example, I still have a bottle of hair gel in my bathroom cupboard.
Is that beside your shampoo? Yeah.
Yeah, as well as that. So, but in my mind, I'm thinking this is not going to happen. The funding's going to fall through, or they're going to change their mind, or something with COVID or whatever. And it wasn't until I think it was June that they made the announcement on social media, and I was thinking, haha, you can't go back now. But I've always said that I wouldn't believe it was going to happen until I got the book in my hand. And now I've got it in my hand, and other people have got it in their hands, and it's out there for people to read and to judge. And I'm just overwhelmed and really thrilled by it all, and a bit nervous about how people are going to react to it, but hopefully they like it.
I think it's a highly refreshing collection. I've had so much enjoyment reading it, Colin, honestly. And every time you think you've got what you've got from the poem, you read it again, and there's a completely different angle, and it's just so clever.
Right time to say that.
Well, I'm sort of looking at your poems. Obviously, you have your spoken word career. I mentioned that earlier, but there's a lot of kind of spoken word influence in the book, and a lot of the words seem alive. Like, that's what I was saying when you were reading those poems. I got equal satisfaction from reading them on the page. Was that important to you, or was it kind of like a natural conclusion that would come out in the work?
I think it's a different mentality when you're writing for stage or the page. I know some poets don't like to make that distinction, but in my process, I definitely do. Like, for example, even in terms of like the formatting, I tend not to format spoken word poems, as in putting them in kind of a shape, and even sometimes into stanzas. Yes, sometimes I break it down just to make it easier for me to learn, but I'm not thinking about the shape on the page. And that last poem I read, Potions and Elixirs, that's really the one that I think kind of transfers into both camps.
Yeah.
And for me, that's my favorite poem what I ever wrote. But it's an ongoing process. It's an ongoing process still. Trying to get better at page poetry.
I don't think you need to get better, Colin. It's just that you've just got it. It's fabulous. I was also going to say to you, and I noticed on the back of your book that's been pulled out by Stephen James Smith as well, this idea of the kind of conversation that you have with, and it maybe is from your spoken word experience, but this conversation or kind of rapport with the reader. And what I sort of pulled out when I was reading, there's a sense of connection, or at least a hankering of a connection there. Was that something that was obvious, intentional to you, or do you think it sort of appeared as you wrote?
That wasn't a conscious decision to do that. I mean, I personally just love poets that write in that kind of conversational style, and I love poems that have a sense of place and of people. and that's obviously kind of transferred into my work. I write a lot about people, and I know I get so much inspiration from just like a trip down to the pub. Not that we've been able to do that for the past year or so, but just sit with my friends and have a chat and talk about people and share stories and laughs and all that. And I get so much inspiration that way. But yeah, I always think that I'm having a conversation with one person, with whoever's reading it.
Yeah.
And even on stage, I'm aware that those people are on a night out and they want to be entertained and want to have something interesting. And that doesn't mean it has to be funny, laugh a minute, but at least make it interesting, entertaining for the people to read or to listen to.
Yeah, I know, it's that sense of wit though. It's great. It really pulls you in, Colin. I was also finally sort of going to ask you about, obviously you've talked about Dunkirk, and maybe you want to talk about that a little bit more. But what is it? Is it important to have support, to have funding as a poet in Northern Ireland? Is that something that you see has really sort of propelled you on your way or in your career as a writer?
Absolutely. Like, as well as I do, Amy, that poetry can be a lonely business when you're stuck, writing your poems by candlelight.
Yeah.
And it's a lonely stage. And if you're going around festivals, it can be a lonely drive to the festival and back home again. But, the book doesn't happen without all those people that I mentioned, and the support that I've had, particularly in the past few years, has just been unbelievable. With Dara Press, with the different arts organizations I mentioned, and obviously with the Dunkirk, where I am the writer in residence at the moment, which I have been in that role since October last year. And this time last year, I was furloughed from a proper job. And it was actually the same month that I got made redundant then that the Dunkirk came and asked me if I wanted to be the writer in residence. So it was just perfectly timed, and they have been unbelievable with me. I mean, I've been involved with them for a number of years, doing workshops and doing performances here and there, but then to kind of working properly with them has been very humbling. But they, like, even their response last year to lockdown, coronavirus and all that, as soon as the first lockdown came, they were straight on the emails and the phone to different musicians and artists to get them to film themselves at home performing their work. And then they emailed that to the Dunkirk, and the Dunkirk put it together in like a cabaret. It was called the Virtual Cabaret, like a broadcast that went out on Saturday nights. And these were like 1.5-hour, 2-hour shows. I think it was going out every 2 weeks, and all the artists got paid. That was through Dunkirk funding and through audience donations. And I mean, over the course of the year, there was other projects they had on the Take Two, the Carlingford. There was workshops, there was online blogs and interviews. So they actually employed 250 artists over the course of the whole year. And I was delighted just to be one of them. And we have other projects coming up for this year, which are even more exciting, but I'm not allowed to talk about those, or I will get beaten with a big stick.
Big secrets. I'm just looking here. There's a couple of questions coming in. We have Matt who's asking, who are your poetic influences, Colin?
When I wrote my first poem when I was 17, the only poets I really knew were John Keats and Robert Frost, and Robert Frost is still an inspiration to me. Over the course of the years, I've grown to love a lot of American poets like Charles Bukowski, Sylvia Plath, Raymond Carver, who does a lot of conversational type poems. Obviously, there's a lot of Irish poets. Heaney, of course, Brendan Cleary, who's a poet you might not know. I think he's from Carrickfergus, but I love him, and he's not that well known, and it's a real shame. I'm looking at the bookshelf behind me here, which is actually alphabetized. So,
you're joking?
Yeah, that's my OCD. So Colin Hassard's book is going to fit in between Allen Ginsberg and Seamus Heaney. That's a nice place for it.
Would you come and do mine, Colin, please? Please, you don't want to see mine?
I would love to. I'll also do your CD collection too, which you can't see. It's off screen here, but it's also alphabetized.
Oh, you're joking.
I've given myself too much away there.
You really have. I've another question from Eamon. Will you be doing a tour of the book?
I will. Thank you for asking, Eamon. I've got a few dates booked in, which I don't know if I'm allowed to say, but I'll say it anyway. What am I doing? Oh yeah, Belfast Book Festival with Moira, John Hewitt Summer School in Armagh, and I actually can't say the last one because it's not been confirmed yet, but it's going to be a big one, and it's full band show, music, poetry, the whole lot.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
And there'll be a homecoming gig as well in Banbridge. So if anybody's watching from Banbridge, look out for that.
Banbridge flocked. Yes, it'll be flocked. Jim was asking, what was sort of like the primary challenge of moving from the performance poetry, the stage to the page, basically? What was the biggest challenge there?
That's a good question. That poem that I read, that I said was the turning point, You're There Now, that poem took me about 20 minutes to write, and it was very little editing done on that. It kind of just came out kind of stream of consciousness. And then, as I say, that got longlisted for the Heaney Award. And I was thinking, wow, this page poetry is easy. 20 minutes, job done on the Heaney long list. But no, it's obviously a lot more difficult than that. Because you have to think a lot more about the form and more about poetry techniques. In spoken word poetry, slam poetry, there's sometimes you can just kind of throw in a line maybe because it rhymes or it gets to the next point.
Yeah.
Whereas on the page, I think each word has to kind of be the right word. Whereas on the stage, sometimes it can be a bit, I don't know, you kind of fluffy and just get to the next bit.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I suppose all these things are going through your mind too when you're writing, because you're so used to writing for performance as well in the past. But you must have some skill set, Colin. At the end of this, we have a question from Matt again. Do you have any words you'll never use in a poem? That's a good one.
Yeah, there probably are, but I'm not going to say them on the YouTube broadcast.
Is that a private message to Matt, maybe?
I think it might be.
Andy says, is that the Liverpool FC yearbook I can see on your shelf?
It most certainly is not, and it never will be, unless I need some paper for the fire.
But he also wants to know, when's the gig in Banbridge?
Need to talk to Gordy. Andy know who that is, but we're on it.
Well, no pressure. No pressure.
If COVID allowed us, that's the biggest thing, is COVID.
So I don't know. Is there anything else, Colin, that you want to tell us about? I mean, or would you like to maybe read one more poem for us?
Well, would you like to read one poem for us? Have you got your collection handy?
I've got the collection. Oh, I'd love you to read it.
Okay.
Go for it, Colin. Come on, go for it. What one would?
Actually, the one poem.
Some of my favourite ones actually tonight already.
We're talking about your book now.
Oh, not my book. No, put that away. Get your book out, please. Come on.
I was going to read your final poem, Opening to the Light, which I love.
No, I want to hear one of yours. Come on, Colin, one more, please. I think you could have done another half an hour, and we would have all been sitting there just chilling, listening.
Well, then, in that case, I'll read the last poem in my book, which, if people want to watch this back, or even just watch the very first poem back about where the coordinates of Banbridge, this poem kind of links in with it. So there's almost like bookends in the book. So it makes sense in my head anyway. And I am a man who loves bargains. And one thing I've missed during lockdown is going around the charity shops in Botanic, which I mentioned in Potions and Elixirs. But I've also been online looking for freebies on Gumtree, and I've called this poem Freebies on Gumtree. In all fairness, the assorted patio slabs, TV cabinet, and used mattress are not the best things. But that's life in the age of the microwave dinner. What's unaffordable isn't needed. What's free isn't wanted. Frugality is key. Think of how your mother saved 20 pence pieces in an empty whiskey bottle tube. Take care of the pennies. This is a lie you won't remember being told. God is not in your image. Surely you desire him to be better looking. Baked beans mixed with fried onions have an extra kick. A playground can be a railway line or a shopping centre. Perspective is key. Think of Sunday school and being asked to draw a plague. Everything except the killings of the firstborn were coloured in. Green for frogs, locusts, boils, but black is only for the slimming of families and bodies. Exodus lacks the thrill of Revelations, but is better than seasons 8 to 10 of The Walking Dead. Put it like this: 71% and rising of Earth is water, and 25% of Earth's population are Muslim. If they really wanted, we'd already swim with the fishes. Sure, the sun's been doing the same act for years. Circus music is universal. This is a truth you won't remember being told. We're all in this together. Make love last longer than a parking ticket. Forgiveness is key. Think of how your father taught you to skim stones. Some jumped, some sank, all rippled. That's my 20 pence. Now here's the offer. One heart in mint condition, unboxed, collection only.